Alright guys, so this week we're checking out the ZOHD Talon 250G. So this is the 250 gram ultralight version of the Talon, very popular plane out in the FPV community. And as you see here, this configuration with the RunCam 4K camera that I'm testing out, it's actually a little bit over 250 grams. It's, I think, 265 grams. So they do kind of intend, and they did design this for use with some sort of a HD camera for footage, because the way the CG is set up here, you do need a lot of weight in the front to balance the CG correctly. There are obviously the two nubs on the bottom of the wing to give you the correct CG. I have the Copilot Lite. This is the FPV version, which comes with the Copilot Lite and the VC400 FPV cameras, this analog system, of course. And the Copilot Lite has the return to home, GPS. Basically, if you lose signal, it'll bring the plane back and it'll loiter above you. If you get the plug-and-play version, it just comes with the motor, I believe, and props, and the ESC. Of course, you get all the servos. This is the VTail version, so you have two servos for the VTail and then two for the aileron. Or actually, we got one for each aileron. You do have to glue the little tail pieces in, because they're not magnetically held in, so you have to glue those in. I just use some like welder's glue. You can use hot glue or CA. A lot of things will work. And then the only thing that's complicated about the Copilot Lite, it's fairly straightforward in terms of setup. Just follow the directions. They have to download them. They're on the ZOHD website. The instructions are fairly straightforward. The only thing that's tricky is getting the control surfaces to go in the correct direction when it's in stabilization mode. And I think I had to swap the aileron and the rudder and elevator channels for the VTail to get everything matched up right, because it was going in the wrong direction. Even with using the there's a little controller box that you plug into the flight controller that will adjust your settings, and the channel order on the radio should be AETR. So if you have a different channel order, you're going to run into a lot of problems to make sure your channel order is AETR. I tried switching that around and messing around with that, as well as switching the servos around. That was a bad idea. That wasted a lot of time. So make sure your channel order is AETR. Other than that, fairly straightforward. The hatch here is magnetically put on like this. And I just have a 2S 2200 battery here. I'm running the 5-inch propeller. If you're using the three-bladed propeller on 3S, I'll probably test at some point in the future. I think you want a something around 1,000 milliamp hours for 3S, and it's an XD30 connector inside there, so not an XD60 like usual. And then you can see the Copilot Lite there buried in the back, just sticky taped on, and that's pretty much it. So I'm going to do a little line of sight test first, and then we'll get right into the FPV. All right, it feels a little tail heavy, which is interesting because the CG seemed like it was actually nose heavy. Actually flying pretty decent. Not as fast as I thought it would be flying. Not a whole lot of wind right now. Pretty smooth. And really quiet, actually. Yeah, it looks pretty good in the air. I think this is going to be more fun FPV, so I'm going to land it. Let's do a little circle around me here. Oh, wow, that was a bad landing. All right, so for some reason my voiceover narration microphone while I was flying didn't record, or I lost the recording. But I can just give you my thoughts on how the Talon 250G flies, and you can pretty much see here from the FPV footage it's vastly different from the line of sight footage. In between, I guess between the end of the line of sight footage and the beginning of the FPV footage, a little bit of wind picked up and it gradually got worse and worse. And this little small plane, even with the stabilizer, does not seem to do very well in the wind. I mean, it wasn't terrible. It was probably at the beginning like 5 miles an hour, and then it started picking up to like 10, and then towards the end like 15. And it did get the plane kind of bumped around quite a bit. And it's not surprising, it's a very light and small plane. The other issue is the torque roll from the motor is pretty severe on this model. Every time I want to give it some throttle, I would have to put in some reverse aileron to counteract the torque roll. And if I forgot to do that, then it would throw me off in some different directions and stuff like that. The CG, based on where the nubs are under the wing, seems to be a bit tail heavy to me. So if you do happen to get this model, keep that in mind, that you probably want to adjust CG a little bit nose heavy. I think that'll give you a little bit better flight characteristic. It'll fly a little bit better in the wind, I think. Now at the beginning of this flight, I was actually in manual mode. I usually start in manual mode just to make sure that everything's okay. And then about halfway through, I switched it into stabilization mode because the wind started getting a little bit worse, but it didn't seem to really help that much. It looked about the same in stabilization mode in the wind. I was hoping that would help. Perhaps my gains weren't high enough for this amount of wind. Perhaps I could adjust the gains and give it a little bit more gain, because it didn't seem like it was doing a whole lot. I know that it was working because I tested the stabilization mode on the ground, and I could tell that whenever I gave it any kind of movement, it would counteract that movement with the control surfaces. So it did look like it was working. It did look like it had enough gain for the small amount of wing surface this had. So perhaps it's just because the model is that small. Honestly, I think that if you were looking for something on the lower weight size for regulation purposes, I would probably get the Drift instead. It's a bigger plane, of course. It'll fly slower, it'll fly longer, and it doesn't have as much problems with the wind as this little one does. Well, this is my feeling on it. I mean, for transportation purposes, this thing is great, tiny. Fits in the car, no problem. You don't have to disassemble it. I just think that it probably needs a better stabilization flight controller, perhaps something with iNav, where you can customize it for this particular type of model, and also something that will address the torque roll problems. I think maybe iNav might be able to do that. Now, I don't know much about iNav. I'm just kind of speculating here, but I would think that something a little bit more sophisticated like that might be able to deal with some of the torque roll problems on this particular model. Anyway, that's about it for this one. If you're looking for good, smooth FPV footage out of a tiny under 250 gram plane, I think that the Drift is probably going to be the one you're going to look at. The footage out of that's going to be much more stable looking, and this one is the Talon 250G is just a little bit too twitchy in my opinion. Anyway, enjoy the rest of the flight. Talk to you guys later.